Alright, so in terms of what I think you should have in your toolkit, if you want to sort of stay ahead of the curve and perform vitals assessments, things like that, the real basics to me, as my own personal opinion here, don't take this medical advice, yada yada, standard disclaimers apply, presenting this information only. You know the drill. The first item I would suggest would actually be one of these pulse oxes. This is a pulse oximeter. Stick your finger in there and it will show what your oxygen saturation and your pulse are. And if you were dealing with something like a potential respiratory issue, this kind of device is going to be super useful. Now, they are relatively cheap. Like, the back plate just fell off of this thing. Back whenever I was doing EMS, it was pretty common for people to have these things as their own personal pulse ox, and they would keep it in their jump bags, and I never really used them a whole lot because I'm just going to use the LifePak 15 and the pulse ox that's connected to that most of the time, but they do work. They do work. And I'm not going to go into great detail on how to use these things. Just be aware that it's checking a pulse through the distal part of your body, your fingers specifically. So if your hands are cold, it's probably not going to read right. If you've got fingernail polish or contamination on your hands, it's probably not going to read right. So when in doubt, always, always, always recheck your equipment. And then the next thing you're probably going to be interested in would be a stethoscope. And this is a Littmann lightweight. Littmann is a pretty reputable brand. I kind of suggest trying to get a Littmann if you can. They are definitely better than the cheap stethoscopes that are out there. Obviously, this one is geared more towards emergency room and EMS. It's got a tape holder, and I've got these two split rolls of tape on here. So, obviously, somebody has been using that to tape up things like IVs in the past. Then, of course, you need a sphygmometer, otherwise known as a blood pressure cuff. Essentially, what you're looking to be able to do is take a pulse, check respiratory rate, monitor blood oxygen saturation, listen to lung sounds, and take a blood pressure. And I'm not going to go into detail on how to do all of these things. This is stuff that anybody that's an adult can research on their own, and it's not terribly difficult to accomplish that. It's certainly not difficult to practice and learn how to take vitals, learn how to write them down, put the date and time on them, and then check to see how they trend over time. And then also figure out what a baseline for someone is. It's not terribly difficult. And you may notice I don't have a thermometer here. Obviously, for complete vitals, a thermometer is useful, but I notice, particularly in times of pandemics and when dealing with lay people, they seem to exaggerate the importance of a thermometer. Like, my experience, if a patient is febrile, yeah, that's something that you definitely want to take note of. But digging into the details on the exact temperature was not super critical most of the time. Like, you would just generally know, well, they've got a fever of X, febrile, so that's an indicator. But specific temperature thresholds weren't super useful. I mean, obviously, you could look into trending fevers over time, but for most types of emergency care, the more salient vitals tended to be related to pulse, respiratory rate, oxygen saturation, blood pressure, mental status, things like that. So anyway, if you want to be prepared, if you think that maybe it would behoove you to have supplies to take vitals and learn how to do that, by all means go for it. You'll want the items here and probably a thermometer if you can get that too. If you have all that stuff, you can do a pretty comprehensive set of vitals on an individual patient or yourself.